Today I'm going to show you guys how to make a sourdough loaf used with fresh milled flour with my flour mill. So let's get started. So before I get started, the process of how I like to do this is I feed my starter the night before I'm going to bake the bread. So I feed my starter around 9 p.m. and then the next morning I start the bread making process around 9 a.m. By the time I do all of the stretch and folds, yada, 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 bake the bread, it's all finished up between 7 to 8 p.m. Give or take, depends on what I'm doing that day, how warm or cold my kitchen is, just kind of depends on all that. So all in all, the process is about 12 hours. But again, I feed my starter the night before and then I start the process in the morning and finish it up in the evening. So now that that's out of the way, let's get started. I'm going to be using this recipe in grams, so it's kind of essential to use a food scale for this. I'm going to start by measuring my wheat berries out, and this is a hard red berry. I'm going to measure out about 550 grams of the berries. For the flour mill, I'm using the brand Nutri-Mill, and I love this one because it's not very loud, and I also love it because it keeps the flour right in this container with the lid on top, which really cuts down on the dust in my kitchen. So to start, I make sure I have my mill on before I put the berries in, and this only takes probably not even a minute to do all of that. There really is nothing better than fresh milled flour. The smell of it is absolutely amazing, and it's very warm too once it's milled. So once again, grab your food scale in a large bowl and zero it out. We're going to start with filtered water, and we're going to do about 430 grams of this. Since the fresh milled flour is warm, you want to make sure the water you're using is pretty cold. Here is my starter, and something to be said about this is I do feed my starter with regular AP flour, and I have no issues when I make it with fresh milled flour. Again, I fed the starter the night before around 9 p.m. and it's now 9 a.m. and it looks pretty darn happy. I love using this whisk. It's absolutely a game changer when I'm making bread. So give that a nice stir and then you can go ahead and add the 550 grams of the fresh milled flour. Next, I'm going to add in 10 to 15 grams of this Celtic sea salt, and I love this salt. It adds so much flavor to it. And you're also probably wondering why I'm already adding the salt in. I've made this recipe many times and I find it no different to add it now or later. I like things simple and I feel like this keeps it nice and simple, so that's why I add it now. So give that a nice mix until you don't see any flour spots. It's a shaggy type of texture. You can cover that with plastic wrap or a damp towel and let this rest at room temperature for at least 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes, so we are going to do our very first stretch and fold. So I just take pieces of it and pull it up and kind of wrap it around. As you can see, it's definitely not giving much. It's breaking apart. But the more we do this, the more it's going to get elasticy and a softer shape. So I'm going to just stretch and fold every 30 to 60 minutes for about the next 3 to 4 hours. No need to stress about time either, so whenever you get a moment, just do a stretch and fold. It's been probably 4 to 5 hours, so we can move on to our next step. I am making my bread in a loaf pan because this is what works best for our family, but you are more than welcome to do this in a Dutch oven. I'm also not using a banneton. I never do, and I never have any problems with it when I'm making bread. So if you prefer one, you are more than welcome to use it. So if you are using one, go ahead and flour that. Otherwise, grab your bread pan, a linen cloth, and you can go ahead and spritz it with some water and sprinkle some flour on there. As you can see, our dough is nice and smooth looking. It has risen a bit. She is looking just very nice and happy. Gently use your hands and just kind of pull the dough out of the bowl onto your countertop. I personally don't flour my countertop. I never have issues with it. If you want to do that, you can, or even spritzing with water will help it not stick on the countertop or your hands. So now you're just going to gently pull this out into a rectangle. If you wanted to add any occlusions, this would be the time to go ahead and do that. I'm just keeping this a regular fresh milled sourdough loaf though. Once that is kind of pulled out into a rectangle, you can take each side and fold it into the center. Grab one end and you're going to start rolling and pulling. So Again, just kind of want to be gentle with it. And if your hands are starting to really stick, again, go ahead and get them a little wet and they should come right off of it. But again, just kind of roll it and pull it. And then at the very end, you're going to want to tuck it. So you're going to tuck where all of the seams are. So do each of the sides. And then I also like to grab my bread scraper and go underneath and put it into my banneton, or in this case, my bread loaf with a towel that's floured. Make sure you flip it upside down. You want to put the quote unquote nice side on the bottom, and then you want to pinch the center. And I do that all the way across the bread loaf. Once I'm done with that, I cover it up and I'm going to pop this in the fridge for 1 to 3 hours, but no longer than 3 to 4 hours. My dough has been in the fridge for about an hour and a half. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 480 degrees. I'm also going to put a 9x13 pan on the bottom with some water, which this will create a nice steam inside of the oven. I took the towel out with the dough inside, and I'm going to place a piece of parchment paper on the bottom of this. Go ahead and grab your dough, and you can put the seam side down on the bottom of the loaf pan and the nice side up. I like to just kind of move the dough around, tuck it in a little bit to make sure it's evened out, and rub the flour out a little bit. This is the time you can go ahead and score your bread. I am not fancy with this at all. I just grab a regular knife and put a line all the way down the middle. You don't even have to score your loaf of bread if you don't want to. Once the scoring is done and the oven is preheated, you can pop that in for about 30 minutes with the steam bath on the bottom. At this point, you can lower the oven down to 450 degrees, and you can also go ahead and take the pan of water out from the bottom. After you remove that, you can bake this for another 25 minutes or so. After about 50 to 55 minutes, your loaf should be all finished up. It should be a nice golden brown on the top. If you're worried if it's done or not, grab a meat thermometer, and the internal temperature of a sourdough loaf should be around 200 to 210 degrees. And now you can let her rest. I let this rest on the countertop overnight. There has been times where I've cut into this loaf actually immediately, and I really don't find it any different waiting or doing it immediately, but they say you should wait, so that's what I did. I'm really happy with how the loaf turned out, and now I'm going to use this bread slicer that I think I just got this right off Amazon, but it has been an absolute game changer for me. I love how thin I can get the slices, which work out perfect for lunches and sandwiches, all kinds of things, and my kids actually eat it. So once I have that sliced, I personally pop this into a gallon zip bag and I put this in the freezer. So then when we go to use it, I just can put it right in the toaster and it's good to go. Or if I'm planning on using for my kids' lunches the next day, I just leave it out on the counter and then it's ready to go. Thank you guys so much for watching my fresh milled sourdough bread. Again, this is just how I make it. Everybody makes bread so different. This is just what works best for me and my family. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Again, thank you guys so much. I'm Morgan Geyer, Morgan the Midwest Lady. We'll see you next time.